My brothers and sisters, history does not always announce itself with gunfire or revolution. Sometimes it comes quietly in the form of a pen scratching against paper. On that day, the cameras flashed. Diplomats whispered. The world's headlines are prepared to roar. And yet, beneath the polished wood of the table, something far greater trembled, the chains of dependency snapping apart. $15 billion. That was the figure. The number echoed like a thunderclap across continents. But this was not charity, not aid, not another poisoned loan wrapped in fine words. This was a pact. Oil for technology, energy for modernization, sovereignty for respect. And in that moment, as history bent, one question remained. Would this deal change everything, or would it vanish like so many broken promises before? To understand the weight of this moment, you must first understand the man behind the signature. Ibrahim Traoré, young, defiant, and underestimated by nearly everyone who stood against him. They called him reckless, too inexperienced, a child playing in the halls of power. However, the truth is that he carried on his shoulders the weight of generations of farmers who bent their backs under the scorching sun, watering dry soil with sweat, generations of miners who dug deep into the earth, yet watched the wealth carried away under foreign flags, generations of children who studied by candlelight, dreaming of electricity that never came. For decades, Burkina Faso lived in the shadow of dependency, trapped in a cycle of exploitation. Loans labeled as aid returned as lost resources, concessions, and sovereignty. The world saw a small, landlocked nation too divided to rise, too weak to matter. But within the streets of Ouagadougou, in the markets of Kaya, in the villages where light bulbs flickered weakly or not at all, something was changing. The people were tired of kneeling, and so was their leader. When Traoré sat across from India's prime minister, the air was thick with skepticism. Why India? Why now? This was about rewriting a future where Burkina Faso would bargain for respect, not beg for it. The pact announced itself in numbers, cold, precise figures that masked the fire burning beneath. 4 billion for oil extraction and refining, not just crude exports, but value added, built, and processed in Burkina Faso. 5 billion for petrochemicals and energy infrastructure pipelines, storage, processing plants that would fuel industries both east and west. 3 billion for steel and manufacturing plants, factories that would rise from Burkinabe soil, shaping the machines and rails of tomorrow. 2 billion for defense technology, rifles, armored vehicles, communication systems, built not in foreign lands, but in Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso. 1 billion for agriculture, telecom, and training programs, investments in mines and fertile fields. There was no handout. These were direct investments, capital planted in Burkinabe soil, expected to bear fruit for both nations. But with every seed comes the question, who will harvest? In the crowded markets, women bargaining over millet asked the question that mattered most. Will this deal change my life? Taxi drivers stuck in traffic shook their heads at the radio. Another promise. Another headline. Farmers in Kaya, welders in Koudougou, students in Bobo Dioulasso. They had seen contracts before, promises swallowed by corruption, profits siphoned abroad. This time, it had to be different, because the true battlefield was not in grand speeches or televised summits. It was in the villages where electricity would either flow or fail. It was in the classrooms where young engineers would either learn to code or remain forgotten. And far beyond Burkina Faso, the whispers began. From Washington to Paris, from Brussels to Beijing, power corridors filled with unease. What is Traoré doing? How dare a small, landlocked nation dismissed for so long sign a pact of this magnitude? The answer was simple. They dared because they must. The moment of truth came with ink on paper. The signature was more than a name. It was a challenge to history itself. A 15 billion gamble. A bet not only on resources but on sovereignty. And the tremor was felt across the globe. For decades, the West kept Africa tied with aid and loans. China invested billions, often on its own terms. Both claimed to hold the keys to the continent's future, but here was something different. India offers factories, power plants, defense production, and training programs. Not charity, not chains, partnership. Even more dangerous to the old order, whispers grew of settling trade outside the dollar. Oil flowing east, technology flowing west, all without Western banks, without the grip of sanctions. It was more than a contract, it was a rebellion, a statement written in numbers. Africa is no longer a prisoner of the West's financial empire. And in the defense clauses of the deal, another revolution stirred. For the first time, weapons in Burkina hands might bear the mark, made in Burkina Faso. Armored vehicles are built in local factories, communication systems, designed by local engineers, no longer renting security, building it, owning it. Critics warned of dangers. What if this dragged Burkina Faso into India's rivalries with China or Pakistan? But the answer came with clarity. Allegiance was not to blocks or powers. Allegiance was to sovereignty itself. This was a revolution disguised as a contract. And revolutions always come with risk. Best case, factories hum, jobs bloom, farmers prosper, students innovate, and Burkina Faso becomes a hub linking Africa and Asia. Worst case, corruption poisons the deal, factories remain foreign enclaves, profits vanish abroad, and the people rise in anger at yet another betrayal. The line between the two futures is thin, too thin. But one thing is certain. History will not forgive wasted chances. The cameras captured the signature. But history belongs to those who live the consequences. 5 years from now, the world will look back. Will Burkina Faso shine with factories, lights, and opportunity? Or will it stumble, its pact buried in the graveyard of broken African dreams? The stakes are not just national, they are continental. If Burkina Faso succeeds, leaders across Africa will look to Ouagadougou and say, if they could rise, so can we. New partnerships will bloom, dependency will weaken, a new map of power will be drawn, not in Washington or Beijing, but in Africa itself. If Burkina Faso fails, skeptics will laugh, the old order will tighten its grip, and another generation of Africans will be told they are not ready for freedom. That is why this pact is more than a contract. It is a seed planted in Burkina soil, watered by the will of its people, judged by the eyes of the world. It is a gamble, a fire, a declaration that Africa will no longer kneel, that sovereignty is not a dream, it is a duty, that the story of Africa will no longer be written in Paris or Washington, but in African hands, on African soil, in African voices. And so the question remains, echoing louder than ever. Will this pact change everything, or will it vanish like so many promises before? The answer will not come from speeches. It will not come from headlines. It will come from the streets, the markets, the factories, and the classrooms of Burkina Faso. History is watching, and the pen is now in Africa's hands.